Welcome to the HR podcast with me, Phil Scott. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Tracey Leghorn, Chief HR and Health and Safety Officer at SUEZ Recycling and Recovery UK. Today we're going to be discussing Tracey's career to date. Tracey started in the private sector but spent a lot of her early career in the public sector within HR. Then Tracey did defy doubters who said that she would find it almost impossible to secure an opportunity back in the private sector after over a decade in the public sector. Little did Tracey know that her experience she gained in the public sector would subsequently help her secure a future role as a senior consultant with one of the big four PwC. Also, Tracey contributed to the pandemic planning whilst with the NHS Ambulance Service. This, coupled with her commitment to health and wellbeing, served her with immense value 6 years later, this year in 2020, with the outbreak of COVID-19. Tracey has a passion for gender equality and gained a doctorate degree with the University of Leicester, which she undertook extensive research in the area of women and work. Tracey will share her thoughts today on the greater agile working which will arise from what is called the new norm. And also we'll be discussing Tracey's fear that extensive home working could serve to marginalise or disadvantage women in the longer term if only women predominantly choose that way of working. Well, Tracey, that's my introduction to yourself. It probably only covers the half of it. So would you please give the listeners a quick overview of who you are?
Right. Yeah, of course. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who's joined to listen. I joined SUEZ Recycling and Recovery UK in August 18. SUEZ Recycling and Recovery UK is part of the global SUEZ group. In the UK, we've got a turnover of around 900 million and employ nearly 6,000 people working across over 300 sites. With regards to my role, well, I sit on the UK board and I'm responsible for HR, health and safety and facilities. Our headquarters is just outside of London in Maidenhead. Even before the pandemic and all this working from home, I wasn't very often there. I like to get out and about to our sites and mingle with our people. And I'm also part of the group's HR Executive Committee, operating from our group headquarters in Paris. So that's what I'm doing with my life at the moment.
Thank you, Tracey. So onto your career and a little bit about that. I mean, you sort of started working life, had a sort of varied start. How did you actually get into HR?
Actually, I started an undergraduate degree in business and personnel. And it wasn't really, I think, till the second year of that I did a module that was a HR related module. I didn't know much about HR. I hadn't really come across my radar too much before then. But we were set an assignment on horizontal and vertical integration. It was Professor David Guest's model, and we had to write an essay on it. And I was just absolutely captivated. From that moment onwards, Professor David Guest literally changed my life and the direction and the course of my career.
And what is it that you like about working within HR?
I think, it's an exciting profession. It's so varied. No 2 days are the same. No two jobs are the same. Different organisations need you to, focus on different things. And I think for me, as someone who is very commercial, HR can really add value in the commercial space for businesses as well. So, it hits a couple of my sweet spots, really.
And you've led teams of over 100 staff. And I mean, tell me, how did you progress from an entry-level position with no management experience to sitting on boards and leading teams of that size?
Well, I mean, I've had sort of most types of roles in HR now, probably because I've been doing it for so long. I've had everything from standalone roles to roles now where, I've got more than 100 people supporting me in my portfolio. I think, I started really with a standalone role, and then was promoted and had about a team of 6 in that first role within HR. I'd worked in retail previously, so I had managed teams. And then really it just grew from there. When I joined the ambulance service, the team was a fair size, but within about a year of joining the ambulance services merged, and so my team grew 3-fold. And then more recently, as my portfolio extends beyond HR, the number of people who are supporting me has become larger. If I'm honest, and I have, as we said a little bit earlier, stepped out of client-side work and worked in consulting with PwC, but I missed having people around me. I missed having a big team around me. So that's why I ultimately made the decision to move from PwC and step back into, a direct delivery sort of client-side role with SUEZ.
And I mean, it's a pretty impressive progression, going from entry level to, to the size of the positions you've been in. What would you say the secret is to your success?
I think I'm very driven. I'm extremely hardworking. I want to make a difference. I genuinely mean that. Every day, I want to come home feeling that, the day of my life I gave was valuable and other people got value from it. I think I haven't planned my career. Perhaps I should. I don't want to give anyone bad advice. I think you should just always keep your options open, network a lot, learn about what opportunities are out there and what people can help you in that. But having said that, I always had an eye on, what's the next thing I want to do. Not necessarily because of, wanting the kudos of progressing so much, but really, where do I want to learn next? Where do I want to build on, what I've learned and try it somewhere else? So I've enjoyed doing the same thing sometimes, but in different contexts and different organisations, because they bring such different challenges to that. So I think that's been helpful. I think you've got to listen to yourself more than other people. You've got to be bold, you've got to be brave, and mostly you've got to know what it is that drives you as a person, and find a role that connects with that and your values, and then it would be hard not to be successful in something that you feel is important and is valuable. So, I mean,
you've obviously done a lot of achievements. Would you say there's any standout achievements or experience that has stood you in good stead?
I mean, a recent one is my experience in the ambulance service that, really has been quite incredible how helpful that has been whilst I've been at SUEZ during the pandemic. I'm not sure if you'd have told me at the time I'd have ever believed it, but obviously ambulance services have to do a huge amount of business crisis planning, business continuity planning, business recovery planning. And so, in my 9 years in the ambulance service, I was involved in business continuity planning, and that included planning for pandemics. So it was a little bit surreal, if I'm honest, when the pandemic that I had spent, 9 years sometimes in a room planning, actually was materialising, live, on the news in front of me. But what that did mean was, and my experience in being in an emergency service meant that I was used to, I don't like calling it crisis management, if I'm honest, but I used to dealing with an emergency situations and thinking about emergency scenarios. So we were able to put in place really a management structure to manage the pandemic, akin to what you'd see in an emergency service. you know, draw on the insight that I had around how people cope when catastrophic things happen to them, which clearly, you know, in ambulance services, you know, we understand a lot about. So I was very keen, you know, even before we got to even lockdown, you know, talking about lockdown in this country, that we were going to be cognizant really of our people and the impact of this on our people and their ability, you know, to cope with it psychologically. And so we've done a wealth of support and a program, Wellbeing program over the course of the pandemic to help with that. I remember having a conversation very early on with my boss, our chief executive, and saying, you know, John, we've got to spend time now during this situation to build people's ability to be resilient around this situation, because at some point when we come out of it, you know, we want our people to be well, and we want them to be in a position to be able to help us recover our business, whatever that looks like at that point in time.
Okay, thank you. It's strange that that you'd have had that training. You can't be many people around that have had that. But just coming into being in the sort of public sector, one of the things that we talk about a lot is people feel they get pigeonholed in a certain sector. So moving sectors can be quite difficult, and even moving from public sector to private sector, that can be extremely difficult. You know, how did you achieve it? What advice would you have to others that would want to move sectors?
I don't think it's helpful to pigeonhole people into one sector or another. In fact, I think it's a really valuable skill to be someone who actually can step into a new environment, step into a new business, step into a new industry, and be able to orientate themselves in that new environment. And it certainly sort of helped me when I moved into consulting, because, you know, every new client, you know, is a different industry and a different business, so you get better at it. For me, yes, you know, I've absolutely faced people saying, you know, Tracy, you know, you won't be able to get into the NHS because they like people with NHS experience. And then, Tracy, you won't be able to get back out into the private sector now. You've spent too long in the public sector. And I think you know, you shouldn't narrow your options down around that, because it is absolutely possible, you know, if you find the right organisation that's open to that. I mean, for me, I stepped into the NHS. I knew absolutely nothing about healthcare. I stepped out of the NHS and into Compass Group. I knew absolutely nothing about the hospitality and catering industry. I stepped into SUEZ and absolutely brand new to the waste industry. In fact, I can't believe just how naive I was about the waste and resources industry. But, you know, you can become a person that is very good at learning quickly about assimilating into new environments. So don't be put off.
Thank you. And you've done business and HR consultancy with the Big Four, notably PwC. So talk me through that. How did that come about? What did you get out of it as well?
Well, I had previously been with, you know, sort of Compass Group before I joined PwC. Interestingly, I'm very passionate about networking. I do a lot of it, and the opportunity came not because I saw a job advertised, but because my name was mentioned in my networks, and so I was called up by PwC and just asked to have a conversation about a piece of business, that the consulting business that they'd won, and that my name had been mentioned a couple of times as someone who might be valuable to work on that piece of work. It hadn't been something that I'd thought about doing before. And I'll be honest, when I rang up my exec coach, Ray, and said, Ray, you'll never believe it. I've had a call from PwC about consulting. He said, oh, it's a long way from a call to securing a role, Tracy. This might be even one step too far, even for you. PwC like to employ, at the time, let's be fair, younger people, graduates fresh out, and don't really go for experienced hires. And I said, well, okay, well, I'll go along and I'll have a chat with them anyway. Which I did, and I was invited back, and I met a partner who was with PwC, phenomenal guy, and we sat and talked, and he shared some insight into a piece of business they'd won. It was the biggest piece of HR consulting work they'd ever secured, I think something around £50 million. And they had were working with 2 other large consultancies on it from the States, and their part of it was around the people agenda and the transition to a new business operating model, structure and pay. And he said quite openly, we normally do a diagnostic, give recommendations, and then it's over to the organisation to then implement them. But with this one, the contract was premised on demonstrating that you deliver on those recommendations that you've made. And, that wasn't an area where they had a lot of capacity or capability at the time. So they were looking for experienced hires. And it was someone with a reputation for large-scale transformational change. And so I joined PwC and worked with a really large number of consultants down in the Southwest, over 100 HR PwC consultants delivering this piece of work. And, it was fantastic to be around such clever, experienced, energetic people. I felt like I was in a sweet shop.
Thank you. And I think you'd said it was your last 4 positions they've came to you. Is that right?
Yeah, very much so. I just don't think you can network enough. You need to think about your networking. You need to, build your own brand. And have people talking positively about you, and you equally network for other people. And as I say, the last my role at Compass, at PwC and SUEZ came really from my networks, rather than actually seeing a job advertised and applying for it.
And you're also a Doctor of Social Science. Talk us through that.
Yes. 25 years ago, when I was studying, I was working full time and had a little boy as well. He was 2.5, 3 at the time then. And I did some research as part of my thesis for that degree. And I'll never sort of know really why I chose the subject, but I decided to research women and work. Now, my sister is convinced it's because we research things or look into things that are important to us. And I can see that at the time, I had my little boy, I was coming to the end of my degree and thinking, what's next? What's next for me, and how am I going to juggle, being a mum and potentially having a career as well? So I did some research into the impact of motherhood on women's work choices, and I interviewed some women who had just recently, or within the last year, had children, and the impact of that on their careers. And what I found was, most of them either gave up work, changed their jobs, left their careers and did an easier job, or they went part-time. And it had quite a profound effect on me, if I'm honest, because they were so affected by that internal struggle that women can often have around not feeling wholly satisfied with their lives, albeit they feel they should say they are because being a mother should be enough, or there's a perception sometimes that should be enough, and that we make sacrifices to put our children first. And in fact, the title of my research was My Children Come First, or thereabouts. And so quite negatively impacted by motherhood in respect to their careers. And then 10 years later, when I joined the ambulance service, I stepped in and I realised that 38% of paramedics there were female, and nearly 80% of those worked full-time, 24/7, 365 shifts. And so, I just had this profound moment of thinking, well, what's changed in 10 years that it's made it possible for women to, have children and have, a really demanding job, a job that's practically, physically and psychologically very, very demanding indeed. And I just had this, need to answer that question. And the opportunity came up a few years later when I'd done a master's degree in employment law and just finished it. And my boss said, "Oh, Tracy, you're going to leave me because, just doing the job's never enough for you. Do you want to study something else?" And I said, "Well, actually, I've got this niggling question that I'd like to go and look into." And so I started a doctorate. I mean, that, it took 6 years. And I researched women and work again, women's psychological attachment to work, and how the strength of that impacts their work and motherhood choices, which I felt very, very privileged to be able to do.
Okay, and the sort of pandemic that we've gone through is sort of leading to a rise in flexible working. I mean, do you think that's a good thing?
I think over recent decades, we've worked really hard to try and have equity of opportunity across genders, and in fact all backgrounds, and we're nowhere near there, but I do feel that we're trying. Where my niggle comes from is if we provide people with the opportunity to make a choice to work at home or be in the office, then predominantly more women might decide that working at home fits better for them, because they're still predominantly responsible for the childcare, whether that's right or not, and that's a whole discussion we could have. And so we've got to be careful as society that we don't create and duplicate what was there before that we've just gone away from, and that women's roles or roles that are done at home don't provide the same opportunities as roles where someone is present in the office. Now, I don't believe that has to be the case, so let's be very clear on what I'm saying here. But what I'm concerned about is that could be the case if organisations don't make a conscious effort to blend their home workers with people who are more predominantly in the office, so that those informal conversations that happen, that networking that happens, can happen across both those fields.
Talk to me, give me some more detail then about these sort of wellbeing initiatives. I know that's something you're pretty passionate about. How's that sort of gone on, and what sort of things have you been doing at SUEZ?
When I joined SUEZ, we got some people together because we wanted to do something around wellbeing, but we didn't want to use an external framework. We wanted to create that for ourselves. That's very much SUEZ way. And so last year we created our wellness charter. We did that by getting 50 or more of our people together and for them to write our wellness charter, and putting it back together that in a way that suited our business and suited their needs. And that has 8 domains within it around, for instance, mental health, social well-being, financial well-being, work environment, etc. And so we'd started and engaged with a partner to help deliver some mental health training and awareness, because that was identified within our charter as a key area and priority. And clearly when the pandemic came, that was never more so. So we've done a lot of work around mental health. I've done webinars every week throughout the pandemic, bringing in experts to help our people, with mindfulness, around some meditation, around personal resilience, because we know personal resilience is something we can develop and we can learn to do and be better at. So yeah, done lots of work along a range of things, and also being mindful that different people need different things and need different levels of support. So we've had webinars that are fit and appropriate for everybody, but then we've also put on particular clinics where our people can join us in smaller groups, 12 or 15, with an expert to talk through what they're going through at the moment and share experiences, whether that be on sleep, or on anxiety. And most sort of recently we're trying to align this to the journey that people are going on throughout this pandemic and where they might be in that journey. So for instance, in the week before the children return to school, we put on a webinar with a child mental health expert and a nutritionalist who could help with providing some information on what nutrition might help our children and give them energy in getting back to school and helping with their immune system, etc.
Didn't you say you'd made some of these wider webinars and content available to be on your organisation as well?
Yeah, we have, because one of our critical success factors in SUEZ is around social value. So we're very keen to give back. And so all the webinars that we've created for our people, we are now sharing out, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So, people can take a look at those.
Good. Maybe I'll try and link to some of those as well. I'll probably take a look at those myself. So, so just bringing on to sort of some general questions. Obviously, you've progressed your career pretty well, and once you get so far, there's not as many people above you to sort of manage you or mentor you. So I think sometimes quite great leaders take inspiration from people earlier on in their career. Who have you learned from early on in your career? Is there anyone in particular that stands out as a great leader?
I think, I've been fortunate to have, several really great, chief executives. And even when, I haven't been a senior, I've been able to get on their radar for one reason or another. So I've had some really good people mentor me and encourage me and support me in my career. I'm not really someone who idolizes people. I'm not a celebrity, lover. I'm very much, everybody's a human being, whoever they are. So I'm not particularly over impressed by, what you've got or, what you've achieved. I'm more impressed by what's on the inside and the type of human being that you are.
Thank you. And once you sort of hit a certain level, I mean, how do you continue to learn? How do you continue to develop yourself?
Well, I don't think we ever stop learning. I've got a real sort of growth mindset. And whenever I go on any sort of courses or things on this, like, oh gosh, you are, you know, the epitome of someone with a growth mindset. I'm the annoying person that always tries to get to the speaker over lunch break and just soak it in like a sponge, you know. And I think as well, you've got to be bold, and you've got to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone to learn. So, you know, I'm becoming much more knowledgeable. I mean, I now look after HR, health and safety and facilities. So, you know, I've stepped out of what was my earlier career, you know, purely in a HR setting, and widened that. And, you know, I don't think I would be fearful of even extending that, you know, portfolio further, because, you know, you don't deliver things by yourself. You deliver things with your team, and so you draw on their learning, you know, to come up with better ideas, and then, you know, go forward and deliver it. I don't think you have to have all the answers yourself. That's not what it's about. It's about facilitating a better answer with the people around you and with your networks.
And has your career gone sort of perfect, or have you faced any setbacks within your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Or has it gone perfect? Along the way, absolutely not. Am I in a happy place at the moment? Yeah, I am. You know, I don't think I've felt more in the right place in my career than I am here at SUEZ. But yeah, you know, I've failed a lot along the way, and we learn from those things. I've gone for jobs in the past that maybe just weren't the right fit for me. You know, I've done, you know, the worst interview performance rate ever. And at the time, that's really heartbreaking. It's really upsetting. But actually, when you look back later on, you think you can see why it wasn't right for you, and actually why a different path was the way to go. So, although there's been lots of failures and perhaps lots of opportunities that I thought were what I wanted, but actually they probably weren't what was right for me.
Thank you. And if you could give a piece of advice, if someone is early on in the career and they're aspiring to sort of get where you've got to, what advice would you have for them?
I think to be a HR director, you know, or get to a chief HR officer, you've got to be commercial. You might get away with it a little bit earlier in your career, but my advice would be start early, know your numbers, understand what your business is really about. How does your business make money? And, you know, be able to talk with your finance colleagues and your operations colleagues with that language as well, because that will give you real credibility. And then it's about you bringing in your HR expertise, you know, to work out how you can get to those commercial numbers that you need. So I think that's really important. The second thing for me, although I think it's the most important, and I've said this sort of several times, is about networking. And often, you know, we're afraid to step out of our zone and reach out to people to network. And what I would say to you is, you know, be brave and do that. And not just connect with people on LinkedIn, but also try and have a meaningful conversation with them so they become relationships, not just, you know, a connection. I think that's really important.
Thank you. We've covered a heck of a lot there. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love people to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn at Dr Tracey Leghorn, and I'm on Twitter as well. So you can find me there quite a lot of the time.